In a small town nestled between rolling hills, there was a humble little bank where everyone knew each other's name. The familiar faces behind the counters greeted their customers with smiles, exchanging pleasantries, and catching up on the latest town news. It was a place where life moved slowly, and no one ever felt like a stranger. James, a veteran, walked into the bank one morning, looking worn and tired. His jacket was frayed, and his face showed the toll of years of hardship, both in combat and in life. He avoided attention, his eyes downcast and his movements slow. Emily, a bank employee, noticed him right away. He seemed different, carrying a weight that no one could see. As James approached her window, Emily saw his discomfort. His hands trembled as he fumbled with papers, clearly embarrassed to be there. She greeted him warmly, trying to make the transaction smooth despite his nervousness. As they went through the forms, Emily noticed the hesitation in his voice and his guarded responses. He was clearly struggling with something. When it came time to fill out the purpose of his transaction, James stalled. Emily leaned in and asked if there was anything else she could help with. He hesitated, then quietly shared that he needed money for basic living expenses. Her heart ached for him. She had heard of veterans facing tough times, but seeing James in person made it feel all too real. After the forms were filled out, Emily offered a local program that helps veterans like him. She saw the skepticism in his eyes, but also a glimmer of hope. When he asked if it was real, she assured him it was, and offered to help him get connected. She even gave him her personal number, just in case he needed support. James seemed overwhelmed, his gratitude silent but powerful. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice shaky with emotion. She pulled out a piece of paper and wrote down the contact information, then did something she hadn't planned on. With a hesitant breath, Emily scribbled down her personal number at the bottom. "If you ever need help navigating the system, or if you just need someone to talk to, don't hesitate to reach out. I'll do what I can to help, James." No pressure, just, whenever you need it. James stood frozen for a moment, staring at the piece of paper. He looked from the note to Emily, his face unreadable. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. "Thank you," he said quietly. His voice was rough, as if the words had been stuck in his throat for a long time. "I don't know what to say." Emily smiled warmly. "You don't need to say anything, just take care of yourself." As he walked away from the counter, there was a change in his posture, a slight straightening of his shoulders, as though her words had lifted some of the weight he'd been carrying for so long. For the first time in a long while, Emily saw a flicker of hope in his eyes, and that was enough to make her believe that perhaps, just maybe, she had made a difference. A few days later, Emily was behind the counter, sorting through some paperwork when the bell above the bank door rang, signaling another customer. She didn't immediately look up, assuming it was just another regular customer. But then she heard it, the faint shuffle of footsteps, the hesitant pause near her window. It was a sound she had come to recognize in the past week, and when she finally glanced up, her breath caught in her throat. James was standing in front of her, but he looked different, changed. The worn, tattered jacket he had worn the last time they'd spoken was gone, replaced by a brand new one. It wasn't flashy or expensive, but it was a far cry from the ragged piece of clothing he'd been wearing before. His posture seemed a little straighter, his steps a little more confident. For a moment, Emily just stared at him, unsure of how to react. He caught her gaze and gave a small, shy smile, one that seemed to say, "I'm doing better." "James," Emily said softly, a smile tugging at her lips, "you look well, how have you been?" James nodded, his eyes warm as he took a deep breath. "I've been doing better," he said, his voice steadier than before. "That program you mentioned, it really helped. I got some financial relief, and it's been a huge weight off my shoulders. Things are still tough, but I'm not drowning anymore." Emily felt a flood of relief wash over her. She had hoped that the program would make a difference for him, but hearing it directly from him made her heart swell with happiness. "I'm so glad to hear that," she said sincerely. "I knew it could help." James gave a small nod, but then his expression shifted. "There's more," he continued, his gaze dropping briefly before meeting her eyes again. "After we talked, I decided to open up more about everything, about what I've been through. I started seeing a counselor. It's been hard, but I think it's helping. I'm trying to work through the things I've been carrying." Emily's heart ached for him. She could see the courage it had taken for him to admit that. She had known, deep down, that his struggles went beyond just financial hardship. The trauma from his time in the military was something that couldn't be fixed by money alone. But seeing him take steps to heal, to rebuild his life, there was a quiet strength in that, and it left Emily feeling incredibly proud of him. But before she could speak, James reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small folded envelope. He placed it gently on the counter between them, his eyes avoiding hers for a moment. James began, clearing his throat. I wanted to give you this. You didn't have to do what you did for me, but you did, and it meant more than I can say. He paused, the weight of his words hanging between them. It's just a little something to say thank you. Emily blinked in surprise as she picked up the envelope. It was simple, no frills, no decoration, just an envelope folded neatly, with a single piece of paper inside. She opened it carefully, her fingers trembling slightly as she unfolded the letter. Inside was a handwritten note. The words were shaky but sincere. Emily, I don't know where I would be right now, if it weren't for you. The kindness you showed me that day changed everything. You gave me more than just advice. You gave me hope. You didn't have to care, but you did. Thank you for seeing me, not just the man I've become, but the man I used to be. I'm working on getting better. I'll never forget this. James, the words caught in her throat, and for a moment, Emily just stared at the letter, overwhelmed by the depth of his gratitude. She had never expected anything in return, not even a thank you. But this letter, this small heartfelt gesture, was more than she could have ever imagined. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, and she quickly blinked them away, smiling up at him. James, I'm really proud of you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You've come so far, and I know you're going to keep moving forward. James smiled, his eyes glistening with a mix of relief and something else, something that looked like hope. I couldn't have done it without you, he said quietly, before turning to leave. As he walked out of the bank, Emily felt an overwhelming sense of peace settle in her chest. She had helped him, yes, but in return, he had helped her too, by showing her the power of kindness and the resilience of the human spirit. As Emily sat at her desk, still holding the small folded envelope in her hands, she couldn't help but feel the weight of James's gratitude. The letter had touched her deeply, but as she continued reading it over again, something in the words began to stir a sense of surprise. James's letter didn't just stop at thanking her. He revealed something far more incredible, something Emily hadn't expected at all. The more she read, the more the weight of his words became clear. Sinmi, I can't tell you how much your kindness meant to me. When I came into the bank that day, I was at my lowest point. I felt like a shadow of the man I used to be. But what you didn't know was that I wasn't just struggling financially. I had lost hope. After coming back from the war, I felt like I had nothing left to offer the world. I felt worthless, like I was just taking up space. But then you helped me. Your kindness, your understanding, it made me realize that I wasn't alone. It made me want to do something more than just survive. I want you to know that the money I've been withdrawing wasn't for me. I've been anonymously donating it to local charities, helping other veterans who are struggling just like I was. I've also been working with a group to help veterans get back on their feet, whether it's finding housing, getting access to services, or just offering them a place to talk. I didn't want anyone to know, but I feel like you should understand. I know I have my own battles, but there's always someone else who needs help too. When I walked into the bank that day, I wasn't just looking for financial relief. I was looking for a sign that things could be different, that maybe, just maybe, I could still make a difference in someone else's life. The way you treated me, the way you didn't look at me with pity, but with respect, that gave me the spark I needed. Now, I'm trying to be that spark for others. I want to help them feel seen, just like you made me feel. Thank you again, Emily. You changed my life in ways you'll never understand. James, Emily sat back in her chair, stunned. Her heart raced as the words sank in. She had known that James was struggling, but she never could have imagined that he was quietly doing so much to help others. Here she was, thinking she had been the one to offer him hope, but it seemed that James had always had this quiet strength within him. He just needed someone to show him that it was okay to lean on others too. His donations, his efforts to help other veterans, were proof of a character Emily hadn't seen in the brief time she'd known him. She'd thought their interaction had been one-sided, with her providing the help. But James had been giving all along, even when it seemed like he had nothing to give. His desire to help others, despite the deep pain he carried, was nothing short of inspiring. Emily felt a surge of admiration for him. He wasn't just a man who had struggled, he was a man who had taken his pain and turned it into something powerful, something that could help so many others who were in the same position he once was. Her eyes welled with tears, and she quickly wiped them away. She had no idea that her small act of kindness had sparked such a profound change in his life, and not just his, but the lives of others in his community. What she had thought was a simple encounter had turned into a turning point for James, and he was now in a position to help even more people than she ever could have imagined. As she folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope, Emily knew that she would never look at her job the same way again. She had always believed in the importance of her work, but now, she saw the true power of kindness, how one simple act could change everything. She hoped that in some small way, she had helped James realize his own worth, and in return James was now helping others realize theirs. Over the next few months, James continued to visit the bank regularly, but it wasn't just for financial transactions anymore. He came to see Emily, and their conversations began to evolve into something more meaningful. At first, it was small talk, how he was adjusting to life after the war, how things were slowly getting better. But over time, it turned into deeper discussions about his goals, his hopes, and his growing sense of purpose. Emily listened, offered advice when she could, and continued to encourage him to keep moving forward. His transformation was remarkable. The man who had walked into the bank so defeated, with no sense of direction, was now someone who carried himself with a quiet strength. He was more confident, more at peace with his past, and he was finally beginning to feel like he mattered again. But what was truly extraordinary was how he had taken everything he'd learned and used it to help others. James started a veterans outreach program, aiming to assist other veterans who were struggling in the same ways he had. He partnered with local organizations, secured donations, and began helping veterans find housing, get medical care, and connect with one another for support. His efforts were making a real difference in the community, and Emily, seeing the positive impact, offered her help. She helped spread the word, organized local events, and managed the logistics of the program, working side by side with James to ensure it grew. It was clear that James had turned his life around, but the ripple effect of his actions was even more profound. His outreach program was giving hope to veterans who had, like him, felt invisible and lost. Emily was proud to have been a part of that transformation, even in the smallest way. She knew that while James had done the hard work of changing his life, it was her simple act of kindness that had been the spark. One morning, as Emily sat at the counter, looking out the window of the bank, she spotted James walking by. This time, he wasn't alone. He was talking to another veteran, laughing, and genuinely enjoying the conversation. His new jacket looked sharp, and his confidence was evident. Emily smiled to herself, feeling a quiet pride well up in her chest. She knew that he was well on his way, not just to healing, but to making a real impact on the lives of others. She had played a small part in his journey, but she understood now just how powerful kindness could be. And as James walked by, waving at her through the window, she realized that sometimes, the simplest actions could create the most profound change. As Emily watched James walk away, his laughter ringing in the air, she couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. She had never imagined that a simple act of kindness, helping him with a banking form, could set off such a transformative journey. It was a reminder that sometimes, the smallest gestures could have the greatest impact. She thought about how people often passed by, without noticing others, how easy it was to overlook someone's struggles when they wore a mask of pride, or appeared too hardened by life. James had walked into the bank that day with his worn jacket and tired eyes, a man who seemed invisible to the world, but Emily had seen past the exterior. She had seen a person, someone deserving of kindness, of respect, of a chance. In a world that was often too fast, too busy, and too distracted, it was easy to forget that everyone had a story, a hidden struggle they were battling. Behind every tired face or weary soul, there could be a lifetime of hurt and hope, pain and resilience. Emily's heart had opened that day, and it had made all the difference, not just for James, but for everyone whose life he would touch with his newfound purpose. She realized now that kindness didn't have to be grand or elaborate to matter. Sometimes, it was simply being present, listening, and offering a hand when someone needed it most. In a world that often overlooked the hurting, the broken, and the invisible, these small acts were the ones that could truly heal. As Emily sat back in her chair, she understood that her role in James's journey had been just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. It was proof that even in the smallest moments, we all had the power to change lives. As we've seen, a simple act of kindness can change a life in ways we might never fully understand. Emily's small gesture helped James find his way back from the brink of despair, and in turn, he went on to help countless others. It's a powerful reminder that no matter how rough someone's exterior may seem, everyone has a story, and sometimes, all it takes is a little empathy to help them see the light again. If you've been inspired by this story, remember that you too can make a difference with just a small act of kindness. So don't wait for the perfect moment, reach out, offer help, and watch how it can change someone's life. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a reminder of the power of kindness. You never know, your gesture might be the one that sparks someone's transformation.